I think that's pretty much the ideal version of it. Just kind of hang out, talk. Maybe people learn from this in the future. Hopefully, our future selves maybe pick up something of value from this in the future. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah.
I like
Um.
it.
Oh yeah. So we're kind of like texting back and forth and having some discussion, and like I found it pretty enlightening, and I just kind of wanted to hash over that. So like, I wanted to go over like where you think we are in the cycle, and I'll tell you like my thoughts and why that
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
And then you can tell me your thoughts on why that is. And then maybe we can talk about like how to approach the cycles, like cyclical wealth, basically, like
yeah,
how
yeah, yeah,
maybe where to get out and get in. And I
yeah.
need to write this down so I don't forget.
Honestly, yeah,
So
here, this is going to be a lot for me to cover too. So here, we're going to go over cycles a little bit.
where we are in the cycle, why, and then
Yeah.
strategies
So
as far as
real
like how to
quickly
approach
to
them.
just lay it out, I think we are towards the end of a gosh, we're at the end of a lot of major cycles, like a lot of big cycles, like debt cycles, economic cycles, weather cycles, smaller cycles like within the business stuff and within certain commodities, smaller stuff, larger stuff within larger commodities, like gold is part of doing a cycle thing. There's so many things at once kind of triggering a little moment in time of like a major cyclical event. It's almost being scary. And some of them are kind of pulling markets in different directions. Because if you notice, um, a lot of the altcoins haven't really pumped as much as we might expect them to, which means that like one of two things could happen with that part of the crypto market. I'm thinking if the actual cycle goes like it has been doing and the coins go back up, or the coins and some of the tokens go back up, then we're basically at the last leg of the bull run, and we're technically still in a crypto bull run at that case. So technically in that case, like Bitcoin wouldn't be in a bull run, but like most of the altcoins would be because they like lag behind by like a year or so. And but if that doesn't happen, then then that we're already past the cycle top. Like we have another couple of years to wait. Um, in which case this is probably all just like, volatile pricing that will be seen as noise in the future. Um, but like if that really is the case, then that means like people have just been calling for this alt season while while losing like 85 to 95% of their portfolio, just being like, we're still in a bull market. What do you mean? But like at some point, I see their point because crypto is just that volatile, that like things do go 85% down and then swing back up 2000% within a bull market. So it's really difficult to tell sometimes. And that's actually why I brought up some of the specific coins over our texts, because the ones that I brought up, I think are not going to regain their all-time high. And one of the reasons is because the amount of venture capitalist backing that was already in them is not going to go back in. They were in at the very, very cheap times and they've gotten out, or they are just going to continue to get out because they're still 100 times up, even with this 85% crash or whatever. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm not really seeing to be a really decent investment. Pretty much anything that's been touched by a VC at any point in time in the past couple of years, like 2 years, because that's what it is for. It's they're actually just pump and dumps, but they're kind of legalized in a certain way where they do it by marketing. And the marketing that they do specifically is they get really smart into crypto, and they know that people care about their memes in crypto, and the crypto memes that people care about are like, oh, it has high transaction speeds, it's scalable, it's like it has NFTs and it has DeFi capabilities, it has like it's all these things, it has staking, like when it has these things, more than anything, it's just to get people to say that it has those things so that people buy it. Like, and
Yes.
the effect of that is like 100 times more than the actual effects of like the what it would do to the coins or the tokenomics or whatever. But like the idea that it makes people think that it would do that, have an effect, that is actually like an extreme for price, and that's what's used in marketing. And that's why I'm bringing up like the venture capitalist thing, is because like a lot of their funding that they do for these coins isn't just like, hey, I'm going to buy this coin and hope it goes up as a venture capitalist. They buy the coin, and then they fund the marketing of it, or like the people who they bought the coin from fund the marketing of it, and it's all part of the whole thing. So that's why like I mentioned Solana. I'm pretty sure that one was just extremely pumped by those kinds of things, and I would be really hard pressed to find it to be a good investment from here for probably the next 4 years for that reason. But then I could see it being a really decent bet because of the same reason of Cardano. And as we saw last time, Cardano fell from like $1 to 1 cent or so, maybe 3 cents, but like maybe on some exchanges it did fall all the way to a cent. And so like after losing 90% of your value and then going back up times 300x after that's something that these Solana type coins can do. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that in the coming future. But at the same time, in the meantime, I think that other things have their time to shine. And like they're the ones that I'm looking at right now where either one of two things is going to happen with these other coins. Either I'm going to be right and like relatively soon I'm going to be cashing out a lot of these like Litecoin type thing because that thing is due to be worth at least $700 within a couple of months. And if it's not, then my other side of the trade is like I'm willing to wait a couple of years because these things tend to be cyclical anyways. So if we really are towards the end of that little tail of the bear market and we've just been waiting for a pump that never happens, we kind of just get bailed out by the next cycle eventually. And then maybe I'll just try not to be as greedy next time, But like, I'm just so shocked that so many of the cryptos have made such a similar pattern and not topped over their all-time high. But they still are making similar patterns to their like old cycles where like, for example, Sia coin, like we're at that last part of the leg where like it dumped 85% down and then it looked like it was over and then it wasn't. But the difference is that like when it went back up, it went back up another like a couple of 1,000% from that bottom, but it was only like a couple of percent from like the previous local top, So that's where it gets people like really, really, really excited because it breaks out of these tops and then the news goes crazy. And then like could you imagine like what the news will be like when Bitcoin starts to go back up and like Bitcoin crosses 50 grand again, and then like Bitcoin starts to cross like 45, like 55 grand or whatever. And like what I've noticed is like so much of crypto is just news and hype based that it could take an event worldwide or a kind of like conceptual notion of like the fear of inflation or something to get these prices up, So that's kind of what I'm looking for now is like what could even trigger that, right?
Oh, I can tell you what would trigger it. The Fed pivoting, right?
Yeah.
That would do it because like everyone's going to rush right back on the risk asset.
My worry for that is that like you said last time, I think, or the time before, is like they like to bluff or like the market is calling their bluff and stuff. I could imagine a scenario where the Fed is like, okay, you can do that bluff for a little bit and just kind of scare the market one more time. You know what I mean? Like one more little 50% downwards push in crypto or something, And then they're like, fine. Cause it's like, like they never come in when we want them to. They only come in like after like some crazy crisis has happened that like they've been waiting for or caused in the first place. And then they go in there and like, oh, we'll save you. So like if that relief pump does come, I feel like something bad's going to happen first. And we're going to have to be like begging them for it, because right now the market's just being like, we don't even need you. We don't need you, man. And we might get called at some point.
I kind of believe that what you're saying is 100% right. Like they're not going to pivot until like there's another crisis that forces them to pivot. Like
that has to be like the pain involved that we gotta feel.
Yeah. So like that's the reason I haven't been buying a bunch of stuff lately. Like once we hit a certain threshold for going down, I call it the bull market support band. Like I basically really stopped buying because I was like, this is not going to be okay. Like I've only been through one bear market and I watched everything get decimated, like high 90%,
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm not here for that. Right. Like I'm here.
But the thing is, there's so much stuff is already that far down. Like so much stuff is already that far down.
Yeah.
So like in my head, I'm like, it's like whatever. Like it's already so cheap.
It can get cheaper. It can totally get cheaper.
It can get cheaper. But like the way I'm seeing it is like I've never been able to buy a bottom anyways. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So like if you buy 50% wrong from the bottom and 50% wrong from the top and the thing moves 100x, you've still made a ton of money, you
Yep.
know? So
So
like I like that's why the number one risk to me is like obviously regulations, but like two is just like the volatility risk is a real risk because it's more of like an emotional stomaching risk. Like, can you actually just like pick a coin that you think is actually like solid enough to withstand those times of the 85% down? Because the thing
yeah,
is like now that the coins are 85% down though, that should be when regardless of how much else it can go down, that should be when we're thinking like, damn, like these are really
it's
cheap.
time to dollar cost average in. Yeah.
That's yeah, that's the best way I think.
Hmm.
Especially over like the next couple of months, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're not far off as far as that goes, right? Like I'm just I bought I caught so many falling knives last bear market that just like my hands are still just they hurt. Right.
I'm still sitting on some knives for sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
as far as that goes, yeah, I understand like now is probably the good time to start dollar cost averaging. And that's the reason I'm looking at getting back into the fiat mines, right? Like I need good sustainable revenue and income so that I can pay my debts and continue to dollar cost average into like coins that I think are going to survive the bear market or coins that I know have the funding to withstand it, right? Because you
Yeah.
can't control founders and teams, but like
Mhm.
if they have the runway and they've been shipping consistently, there's probably no reason for them to stop building because now is the time to build. They're not going to get hounded on Discord or Telegram. Like when coin go up, right? Like they're not worried about that stuff anymore. It's just time to go ahead and do the building. So I watched last cycle in 2018, 2019, and even the beginning of the 2020s, where like we remember backed like BAKKT, like it was the organization of the people who own the New York stock market, Dave Sprecher and Kelly LaFleur. She was a senator in Georgia for a short time. They created an institution or an organization that basically is pro crypto and wanted to bring crypto to the masses, basically. And the only thing that really stopped them was regulation, right? Like they're still in existence, but it's not nearly the powerhouse that we thought it was going to be. I watched all of that go down. I watched the plumbing in the infrastructure for like FTX and Coinbase to spread everywhere. Same thing with Gemini. Like it happened all across the planet. Like the foundation was laid, the groundwork was set up for this bull run so that when it could happen, it wouldn't be like five exchanges running all of crypto. Now it's like 30 to 40 all over the planet running crypto. Next cycle, it's probably going to be hundreds, right? Because like FTX, were they even in existence 4 years ago? I don't know.
God, I
Now
don't
they're the
remember.
second largest crypto trading. They're the second largest crypto exchange on the planet, right? Like they came through because like the relationships were made, like the regulatory clarity, what little we have was created for them to exist, basically, right? And that was all
Here in
done
the
during the
US,
bear
you're saying?
market.
Well, they didn't even start. Well, gosh, man, like we can't even use the full FTX here.
Yeah, exactly. But like they're kind of limited on the amount of coins that they can offer, right? Because of
Yeah.
regulation. You go,
And futures and stuff.
yeah, exactly. But like you go across the pond, oh, the world is your oyster. You know, they're going toe to toe with finance, basically, right? Um, and I watched Coinbase go from being as heavily regulated as FTX now to basically the Binance of the United States. They offer everything. Like if it's partially scam worthy, it's okay. Maybe it's all
Yeah.
right. You know, they do their best
But
to
you got to
protect
notice what they
you.
are. Like, notice what the coins are. They're almost exclusively ERC20 tokens.
Yep, and heavily VC backed, right? So like,
Yeah, yeah, heavily. Like most oftentimes, in fact.
but look at
But like,
Filecoin, for example. Perfect example of that, right? Like huge corporate backing. It's mainly a business to business thing where like, hey, you need storage, we can give you storage. Like that's kind of where crypto and blockchains they thought it was going to be moving basically. And I think honestly that is the future. But like I see how exponentially large the space has gotten going from 2017 to now. And I gotta think that's not gonna change. It's not gonna go away. Like I had an old acquaintance of mine text me like on Discord last night and this morning, and he's like, "What do you think's gonna happen with crypto?" Like I heard about these new regulations that they're trying to pass that are like crypto friendly. And I told him, like, I don't even feel the need to stay abreast of the latest legal developments because at this point, I think it's going to be legalized, it's going to be legitimized, and it's going to be just widely accepted throughout our population for multiple reasons. So, like, it's just a matter of waiting, right? So, like, we got to wait for the next 100 or 200% move upward, right? In Bitcoin, right? For the next bull cycle. And we win, right? Just stay in the market, stay alive. If you buy, even like you said, 50% from the high and you drop another 50%, it's going to hurt. But on a long enough timeline, that next 200, 300, 400% move goes, what happens? You've still made a ton of money.
Yeah, it's all noise in the background.
Yeah. So those are just my thoughts about that. And then as far as the cycle goes, I wanted to go in on that a little bit more. So like,
I think cycles
our cycle,
because people draw them from different spots all the time too, you know.
Exactly. So like you have to have a defined baseline, and that's what gets people in trouble. Like they don't have defined characteristics. They're going off of gut feelings, and this market is very specifically designed to steal your money. If you just operate off of emotions, you will not be okay.
Yeah.
So I think our market got ended prematurely by the Fed and all the things that were happening in the world.
I'm wondering about that, man. Because like, yeah, dude, like straight up, it might have done that, but at the same time, it's like, what if, like we've seen the Dow Jones or the S&P and the Nasdaq recently, right? It kind of like regained 3 or 4 weeks of trading in like a week. Kind of bounced back really heavily. I'm expecting that kind of bounce back to show up in crypto as well pretty soon because they tend to like correlate.
Actually, crypto tends to move faster than like the Nasdaq for the most part. Like it's like a leveraged bet almost. So like we move up way higher, way harder, but we also dive down way further, right? So yeah, I'm wondering if there's going to be a relief rally too, because you can't have like 9 red candles in a row and like not get a green one, right? Like that's insanity, right? Like we've done it. Actually, no, I don't think we've ever done that before, right?
So far, this is the first time.
Yeah. So like there's probably going to be a mild relief rally, even if we just trade sideways, like that's going to happen, right? But I don't think we're visiting all-time highs again, like not for the next few years. Like in my mind, cycles.
Not in Bitcoin either. I don't think Bitcoin either.
Yeah.
In fact, like if you want me to tell you something, man, you know how everything's supposed to be cyclical? I am wondering if it will continue to regain a new all-time high every 4 years, regardless of the macroeconomic conditions. Like if we're just look, man, if we actually do have like a 1929 style 12-year bear market in stocks, what's that going to do to Bitcoin? Like the ultimate risk on asset. Like one of two things is going to happen in my mind. Like either it's just going to keep falling with the Nasdaq, fine, and then, you know, everything deflates and we have a long recession, long depression. But like two, that could be the asset of choice that people go into instead of whatever ends up happening.
I think that's right?
Like negative yielding debt.
Yeah. So it's like you have the choice of, you can buy in a recession like 1929 style, worst case scenario, right? Like you can buy stocks that are basically down only for the foreseeable future, right? Because nothing's really changing as long as
that's honestly the way that I'm going to
nothing's changing, right? Or you can buy bonds, which, okay, you'll get 3% interest. Congratulations. Or even inflation protected bonds. Maybe you'll get 9 or 10% interest. But like last I checked, inflation was supposedly at 8%. We both know like it's way higher than that. So you're still losing money even with the bonds. And then also like bond yields are going up because bond prices are in the dirt and still trying to get lower, right? So like you might not even get face value for your bond if you buy that, right? So like you have no other option. So what I think could happen is, let's say we ended up in that like Great Depression type deal, worst case scenario. If Bitcoin survives, right, and it does become like what we think it can do, if everyone starts funneling and FOMOing into Bitcoin because it's just the next 4 year cycle and we're supposed to be uncorrelated, and then Bitcoin starts going up in value and rallying hard, everyone and their kid sister is going to throw their money at the one asset that's bucking the trend and is giving good returns.
Yeah.
That creates the next hype
It's like
cycle, next
game
market.
theory in action.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is exactly what Satoshi had in mind when he built that, right? Because like he knew that the existing financial system was not going to be okay, right? And that people were going to have their wealth stolen by the government, whether it be through inflation or straight up confiscation.
Yeah.
So I just think that if we do enter that worst case scenario, like I gotta hope that Bitcoin just does what it's supposed to. There's no guarantee that it will. This is not financial
And you know what's
advice,
funny,
right?
man? My personal bet is that it's not going to perform well during those times. I'm going to keep some a little bit of a moon bag, you know, just in case.
Mhm.
But like my personal feeling of it, and just like think about the mathematics behind it, it's like the dollar price of these things has nothing to do with the Bitcoin itself. It's literally just about like how many dollars are in circulation. And if things start like deflating, there's just fewer dollars in circulation. The Bitcoin is going to be worth less. And so it's like on a dollar value over time. Like, I don't know if it has to keep hitting new all-time high in terms of dollars, you know. There might be other ways to measure it. Like we can measure it against like oil, but even that fluctuates too much, you know.
Like
So
commodities, for example. Yeah.
yeah. But like that's my worry about it, is that like it just doesn't, it just continues to act like a risk on asset. And I don't know at which point it could or will become, like how big it has to be before it becomes a risk off asset, you know?
Yeah, before it breaks that trend, right? Like before it
Right.
makes it into being a risk on asset. Like before it wasn't even an asset. People just thought it was smoke and mirrors. Now we're talking
Now
about
it seems to be
it's a
trading like the
legit
NASDAQ.
asset. Yeah, like you see the progression, right? Of like up and to the right over time, right? Like I just gotta think. I just saw an article talking about Citadel is creating a Bitcoin trading desk, right? Like you don't do that unless you have an edge in the market and you understand that this thing is not going away anytime soon. Like
Right.
same thing with like the people who own the New York Stock Exchange. Like they are part of, I think, ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange. They have stock exchanges all across the planet. Like they knew like this might be a real thing. And they've been in crypto since probably 2014. Like, oh my God, like that's insane. So like you don't have that level of wealth, that level of power getting involved in something that's just gonna go away. Like I don't think so at all. Like
Yeah, I don't think so either. Is at least not to make an investment in it like that. But at the same time, though, Citadel gets like Robinhood's trade information, right? So they're getting the Bitcoin trade info anyways. Like, so
they
I mean, that's
edge.
probably the edge. Yeah, it's probably the edge that they're, yeah.
Yep, they can use the fleece retail, and it's totally legal. So, I mean, like I said before, like you're not like they're gonna get an edge somewhere, and then they're gonna commoditize it, and then they're gonna push it out to everywhere they can, so they can get more revenue off of it. Right? Either way,
And
that's still
then
good
it'll
for
be
crypto.
expensive.
And
Right.
that's
Well,
the
do you
reason
think then it'll be like a
that,
risk
right?
off? Would then do you think it'll be a risk off asset? And by risk off, I'm meaning like the difference between like gold and stocks, you know?
Yeah. Ultimately, the best case scenario is that it just becomes like, you know, Michael Saylor, Michael Saylor, Anthony Pompliano, they call it like the apex predator of assets, basically, where it doesn't matter if it's risk on or risk off. It just like it's going to perform over time because it's programmatic, right? Long term, in my mind, I think eventually it does become a risk on asset, but it has to hit that next stage, right? Or I mean, it becomes like the asset where it doesn't matter. You just park your capital there anyway, because you know on a long enough time frame it's going to go up. So I guess it becomes risk off, like you were saying. Like we're at the point now where we have hedge funds and a few long only people, like insurance companies and pensions, are buying Bitcoin, and they've bought like endowments for college, like Brown University, like some of the Ivy Leagues, they've been buying crypto, right? But look, we need like the next step is sovereign wealth funds, right? Like all these players that we're talking about, they're not buying on spot. They're not going to push up the price because why would they? That would hurt them very specifically, right? So they're going to buy OTC, and that's just less and less supply being available to create float and less supply that keeps the market where it's at, right? So sooner or later, there's a supply crunch, a price pops up. And
Yeah,
small
that's
loan
actually a
folks
great
don't
point.
sell for funsies. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that's a great point because I could see that being a major trigger in the future because there's only
Mm-hmm.
like between 1 and 2 million Bitcoin left on exchanges right now for purchase.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you right now the financial institutions of the world are trying to figure out how to scoop up all of that without letting us notice.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know?
And that's OTC, right? As long as there's
Yeah.
people
Well,
trading.
that's what I mean though. Even if they do it in the OTC, like you were saying, like the supply would be reduced so much that like we would notice eventually, you know?
Yep.
We'd be like,
So
hey, wait
here's
a
the
minute.
other thing. They also go to the miners directly, right? So when you think
Hmm.
about Riot and all these other large blockchain companies, like they just have an agreement, like, hey, we'll buy your Bitcoin off you at 10% premium. And we get virgin coin that's never been anywhere. So we don't have to worry about like legal issues because it was on Silk Road or the Colombian cartels had their hands on it at some point. And two, like we know where it came from, how it was mined. So we've sidestepped all this ESG BS, right? Excuse me. I like ESG. I like having a clean planet, but like a lot of that argument is disingenuous to me, right?
Yeah, not with the Bitcoin thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
exactly.
Especially
So
because
like
now people are using like waste energy, like, or you know what I mean? Like, there's like
yeah, they're
excess
using
stuff
like
that they're burning
flare
anyways.
energy from
Yeah.
like oil refineries and everything, like the flare gas. They're burning that stuff up and keeping it from going into the environment. Like that is the definition of best case scenario for ESG. Bitcoin
Mhm.
wins, the oil company wins, the environment wins. But like people will still say, "Oh, it uses too much energy," and I'm like, "Oh my god, you're
You
not
know, it
paying
also
attention."
uses a lot of energy. Brinks trucks
Yeah,
carrying around
exactly.
stuff, cash.
Or like all the AC units and all these giant buildings that we have our additional financial system built into, right? Like, oh my God, how much energy goes into some of these skyscrapers that have been made, right? Like it does not even make sense, right? Um, so I get it, like that's what humans do, but we have to at least be reasonable about that, right? Um, so let me go back into the whole like where I think we are in the cycle. So, like I said before, I think the cycle's done, Zos, man. Like,
Yeah. Even for
there's two.
altcoins, like all of them, like every coin, like so you're waiting another 3, 4 years for another spike.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like 1 to 2, honestly, right?
Okay.
Because if you look at like everyone's waiting for the relief rally, I think there will be a small one, but it's going to be a relief rally and an already existing bear market, right? It won't be a
Hmm.
relief rally that starts the bear market. Because if you
Yeah,
look
yeah.
at like RSI and many of the major metrics that indicate like where we are in a cycle, they were all declining even on the way up to 69,000, right? Like I think the pump to 69,000 was purely manufactured, right? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
yeah.
almost,
I've seen yeah. Like in fact, the pump before that might have been the actual top, and then
yeah.
it seemed like the next one, like you're saying, could have been like an artificial and
Yep. It was like an
weird to think about.
artificial mother of all dead cat bounces that made a new all time high. Like
And
effectively,
in
when you
fact,
start looking
it's so artificial that you know where the top ended up being
where 69,000.
69,000. Yeah,
Yeah.
literally the most meme number of all time. And
Yep.
like I can almost guarantee you that was Elon Musk himself being like, haha,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like that's the top
Exactly.
of Bitcoin right there.
So I agree 100%. And it just happened to be like, I think it was in December too, again, right? Like how many 4 year tops have we had in December? So like, or November, right? It's right in that little window.
Right in that, right in there.
So I'm like, okay, so like if that was actually the top and we had that artificial dead cat bounce, that was your altcoin rally right there, right? Like it really was. So like if that was it, or even let's say whatever this relief rally, whenever the hell that comes, like if that's it, you're probably looking at a year or two of straight bear market, right? Now, if we're lucky and it was the first top at 64,000, that would be a year. That was a year ago. So we only have like a year to go, right? So like a year or two tops, I think is going to be the beginning of the next cycle. And it's not going to be like a run straight up. It's probably going to be the slow trend upwards
Yeah.
because that also
Are you
gives
thinking in
time.
4 year cycles?
Yeah, I'm thinking in 4-year
Four.
cycles, basically.
So
Yeah.
like, so we saw one in like 2013, 2017, 2021. Wouldn't you think that like the next one is in like 3 years from now,
Yeah,
in
but it goes up
2025?
for like a year or so before we hit the top, right? Because we're thinking of
Oh, okay, yeah,
years.
that's a good
Yeah.
point. Yeah, you gotta catch it earlier than that because Bitcoin's
Yeah.
pretty slow about getting up there
Hmm.
for sure. And in
So
fact, when you really think about it, like Bitcoin, like from its top to bottom last cycle, it went from like 20,000 to like 4,000 in like a year, and then kind of bounced around. And then like I don't even think it reclaimed that low. It did almost,
it
but like
almost got to the new low because there was like December of 2018, which was the hash wars, and I will never forgive Craig Wright and all of them, man. I will not.
it's funny. That was so long ago. I don't even remember what he did. I'm gonna have
Yeah,
to like look
so
back into that name, I guess.
it was the split between Bitcoin Cash, which I think was going by like Bitcoin ABC at the time, and Bitcoin SV, right? And Craig Wright was claiming he was claiming he was Satoshi, the inventor of Bitcoin, right? And he was saying that he had 1 million Bitcoin and he was going to dump all his Bitcoin and buy Bitcoin SV and like catapult the price of Bitcoin SV through the stratosphere and simultaneously kill Bitcoin, the real Bitcoin. So it freaked out the market and everyone just dumped. I mean, like hardcore. It was a 50% drop in one day. Like I
Hmm.
remember that because I was just like coming home from work and I was like, oh my God. Like I knew it was going to be bad, but I wasn't expecting that. Um, so I think the low was like 3,200 that day and it dropped from
Okay.
like 6K plus. And I was like, oh, because
Right.
everyone thought
But
6K
then
was the floor.
that was
Mm-hmm.
2018, right?
Correct.
So 2 years later, when like the whole sickness comes out,
Yep.
um, it dropped, but it didn't go to that point. It almost did.
Yeah, it got down to like 34, 36. I think. Like it was close to it. Like Ethereum was sub $100 at that point. Like it was the
Yeah.
greatest buy ever for Ethereum. Um,
So what that means is though, like we could have already hit like no, probably not. I think a major
I
bottom is
think I
still
know where
coming
you're
in for
going.
Bitcoin. We still have a little while to
Mhm.
wait. We still have a little while to wait for the bottom of Bitcoin. It could be
Yeah.
it could be this year though.
And that's the reason I'm not buying anything, man. Like I'm just gonna look if I buy something, it's gotta be something that I completely have absolute conviction in. So like maybe a little bit of ETH, maybe a little Bitcoin. And not even Ether, because like Ether in a bear market performs horribly, even related to Bitcoin, right? So like last cycle it dropped from 1,400 down to like $80. Like I can't even do the math, but that's like mid 90s percentiles, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a huge drop. Bitcoin dropped like 83% from its all-time high. And I'm just like, okay, if I have to take a 90+% hit or an 80% hit, I'm gonna go with the 80% hit. But like really there's these cool things called stable coins. So like I'm just going there and I'll wait it out and see what happens, right? And maybe I can stick them someplace in LP and get maybe 2 or 3% yield and call it a day because that's still better than bonds, right? Because like I'll be able to get face value for those dollars at that point or those stablecoin dollars. Um, so yeah, that was my point with that. So I think we are going. I think the cycle's donezo's. We're just in that down only where you look at the market and you're like bounce you POS, please bounce upwards so I can sell the rest of my altcoins, right? And it's just gonna we're gonna have to wait and see how bad it gets. And I think the Fed doing its thing definitely murdered off any chance of there being another cycle. Um, so like I basically have two theories with that. A, the cycle's already over and it was at 64,000, or B, the cycle's over and it was at 69,000. And given the Fed's actions, there's zero chance of any real altcoin rally or anything like that happening because everyone's running from the market right now. And all those VCs we were just talking about, I guarantee you, because of the SEC coming in and saying, hey, you can no longer crowdsource from retail, like fund yourself from retail, you have to get professional accredited investors or institutional investors. They all got access to Solana for pennies on the dollar. They got access to Luna for pennies on the dollar. Well, I said the L word. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. They got access to Avalanche and all these other L1s for pennies on the dollar. Yeah, they're going to dump those things ruthlessly and get every ounce of value they can all the way through this recession. Oh, I mean, all the way through what I think the coming recession is coming by the Fed. And then, like when the cycle starts back over again, probably because they kickstart it, they'll buy back in at super cheap valuations and just let the thing run up. And maybe they take profits at 6 or 10 or 100x instead of like 200x or 1,000x, right?
Yeah.
So that's my thought process on where we are as far as like the cycle being dunzos and why, right? Um, and I think you're 100% right. We're at the end of a lot of really big deals. Like there might be the end of the debt cycle because like our financial system's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Commodities is doing some really weird stuff, like just up only for the most part, and that's not good for humanity in general, right? Like we need energy. Energy is what powers our civilization, and like the sanctions and all this other stuff, it ain't great. Like that's gonna definitely hurt a lot of people. Like, and people are thinking about it like, oh, I couldn't get my thing off of Amazon today, or this wasn't available in the store. Dog, like wheat, like Russia and Ukraine produce like some insane amount of the world's wheat, like 25%. Like what happens in a year or two when those crop yields don't make it to market because they were never harvested or they're destroyed? Like you're talking about like famine, like real life famine in like 2023, 2024. And it's like it will take years before they can get that production back up to where it was because you have to then go back to the fields, get people working, plant it. Oh, by the way, Russia and Ukraine produced a huge amount of fertilizer. So, like, even the yields you get are going to be diminished for years before they can get that back up and running, right? So, like, we're in the US, we're going to be fine, right? But if you live in like the Middle East, if you're like in some African country and your government doesn't have the clout slash military power to like secure what it wants, you may want to think about where you're living at. Oh, but you're probably too poor to be able to move. So I feel
But do
bad
you
for
think America's really going to be okay during that time?
you. Ultimately, yes.
Do you think
That's
we
the perk of having the
produce enough
strongest
food here
military.
locally?
Huh?
Do we produce enough food here, like within the states, or like
I would
because I'm
say,
seeing food plants get bombed already. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know. I feel like they're trying to cause a crisis here too.
yeah. So, like, I feel like in the end, like, Americans will be okay. Let me rephrase that. Most Americans will be okay, like the top 50% and up, because we have investable assets. We're always going to have something to draw from to sell to get what we need. The bottom 50%, they are screwed. Like inflation is not your friend when you have no investable assets or you have no
Yeah.
assets at all. Like all your money was already going to food, transportation, and housing. What happens when all those go up higher and you're not getting a bigger paycheck? Like that's when you get civil unrest, and that's exactly what's going to happen in all those other countries. But once again, we have a pretty strong police state. They probably don't. We have a strong military. Those other countries don't. Like we're going to secure what we need one way or the other because like there's a reason we've been top dog for like the last 100 years. It's we were in love with the petrodollar or we were backed by gold before that. Like, and in the end, it just comes down to brute force. Like our central bank will steal the dollars from your central bank and we will secure what we need one way or the other. So like you're either with us and you're okay, or you get Russian, right? Or you get Afghanistan. Do you remember we stole like $500 billion from them or whatever? Yeah,
Libya, or wait, Libya, was it Libya,
exactly.
Liberia, Libya?
Mm-hmm. So these are all things that make me think the US will be okay. It's going to be ugly. It's not going to be nice. We're going to feel some pain. There's no getting around that. Thank you, Jay Powell. So yeah, I think as far as negativity goes, it's not going to be fun to be anywhere on the planet in about 2 years, right? Like we're going to be like,
Yeah.
whoa, this is crazy. Because we've never seen stuff like that before in our generation, for sure. I doubt the boomers have even seen anything like that. Um, and then also, I think there's going to be a recession because of the Fed. Like they're talking about a soft recession, but like if you know, like the supply of pretty much all the stuff we really need, like wheat, oil. Russia was a huge exporter of gold, by the way. Russia has a huge stash of gold, by the way, and everybody wants gold. Um, and natural gas, all this stuff, like your supply is getting constrained epically by throttled by 25%. And the world was already kind of at a glut before this happened, but now we're realizing, hey, half of the planet is no longer our friends. So we're not going to be using supply chains to get stuff back and forth as much. That creates like a more inflationary environment. So your supply was already shrunk by all the sanctions, and then you're cutting off flow from other countries, which shrinks it even more. That creates inflation on the other side with all this money that you've printed. Yeah. And the only thing you can really do as the Fed is create a recession and bring down demand, hopefully to where somewhere find some type of happy place with the supply.
That literally is it. Like they have to create a recession. Yeah, that's it.
So like they're saying soft landing, and there's a good chance that's going to be hard as an MFer, right? It's not going to be a soft landing. Like I hope it is, because I don't like suffering. But like I don't think this is good. Also, that same recession further hurts Russia because of the sanctions. Because like when America has a recession, the planet has a recession. We export our recession everywhere else, right? Okay. So like if Russia's already dealing with sanctions and trying to like be okay, and all of a sudden no one's buying stuff across the planet, it ain't great for Russia even more. So like that helps to bring them to heel and stop this foolishness with Ukraine. And hopefully the world can kind of resume in a happy place in about 3 or 4 years. So while that's all super dark, I'm sorry, these were just my thoughts.
Well, this is all important stuff to consider, man.
Yeah. I think in a year or two, it gives a lot of this stuff a chance to play out and clear out. We can see how bad things really are. And meanwhile, I just expect crypto to effectively be down only on a long enough time frame until A, the Fed pivots, or B, we start a new cycle and it does become a risk-off asset because it pumps and everyone's like, oh my God, I can finally get yield somewhere. And they throw their money into crypto, basically, right?
I feel like that would take like the demise of the system. You know what I mean? Because if people if they cause the recession to save the system, then Bitcoin's not going to be the thing that they go into, if that makes sense. That's a complete opposite.
It's human greed though, right? So like, if you can make 20% in the stock market, or 69% in the stock market, we'll go with the meme names, right? Meme numbers, right? But you have an asset that has a proven record of returning 400% year over year compounded, which is Bitcoin, right? Why would you not go with that? They did it last time. That's what happened this cycle around. The hedge funds got in there and they pumped everything. Like you could have bought Dogecoin and made multiples on your money, right? All these S coins like Shiba Inu, like you could have bought Shiba and made multiples on your money. It doesn't really matter. Like once we get into like a raging bull market, if you've been positioned there because you were there from the last bear market, you will make a ton of money. It happened in 2017. It happened in 2020 and 2021. The cat is out of the bag. Like everyone knows. Like when Ray Dalio, one of the biggest investors, like one of the most successful investors in Wall Street's like, hey, you might want to buy some Bitcoin, right? Like he's not saying that for funsies. He's already got a position and he wants you to pump his bags, right? Like he has this stuff. Right. Look at all our most successful people, like our actors, our politicians, like everyone of real note has some exposure to crypto. It is an asset class already. Like everyone knows what happens in 4 years. Bitcoin goes up. Number go up technology, like as long as that sustains itself, it's like this self-fueling narrative, and that's all that matters. So like I hope that's the case, right? Because I have a lot of my net worth in crypto. So I gotta think that like now that I have skin in the game and I've watched a lot of shady stuff go down over the last few years, I think this is not gonna go away. I think Kathy Woods did an estimate, like if 5% of the investors that are in the stock market throw their money into Bitcoin for like even a 5% allocation, which is nothing for them, right? Bitcoin's going to go to $250,000, right? So if there's so much excess money out there looking for yield because they got to beat the Lipper average on the stock market, like doesn't matter. Like it's the smallest trickles of that really hits the crypto world. Like
Yeah, I
Bitcoin,
mean,
Ethereum,
technically,
all the stuff goes up.
yeah. You know what's funny? Depending on how you measure it, that could push Bitcoin up to 5 million a piece.
Yeah, I
And the
completely
way that I'm
agree.
measuring it is like, if like, let's say you take 5% of 5% of your portfolio or whatever, and you equate that to like a market cap, then
Hmm.
like that would be a certain trillions of market cap. But what ends up happening in Bitcoin is like for every dollar that goes in, it goes up like $25. So like if we're putting in a million of market cap, it's going to be going up 25 million. You know, or, so like if yeah. So
Yeah,
if it
so
goes
you
up
got
by
into
however many
market
times,
cap, and I don't often talk about that with other people because, like, if you say market cap to the average person on the street, they're not going to have an idea of what the hell you're speaking about, right? So, like, market cap puns, and I'm going to call it Ponzinomics because I don't fully understand market cap myself, but I know enough of it to understand, like, that's the reason Shiba will never cost as much as a Bitcoin, right? Like, there's not enough money
essentially,
in the
yeah,
world.
yeah,
Yeah.
essentially, yeah.
Um,
But at the same time, though, like what you can do with I've seen is like you take that meme coin and you lock up like 99.99999% of the supply, and then people don't
mhm.
really know how much is actually out there, and then the price goes to whatever number
Yep.
because then market cap doesn't actually really matter for those people because in total it matters because if you actually still put that sell pressure on, you'll notice the market cap. But until you do, the market cap is actually just like the circulating coins, which is interesting.
Yeah. So that's
Which
one
is
of
I
the
think what
reasons I
happened
like
with Dogecoin.
CVX because it was all locked up, right?
Yeah,
So like I just think you can play with market cap games or whatever, but in the end, like there's only so much Bitcoin, right? Like there's
yeah,
only so much Ethereum, and you have to look at network effects. So we're talking about sovereign wealth funds as the next logical step for long only big money to come in. Like if they dip even so much as a pinky toe, and they're the next logical, it's already gone up the food chain to them. If they dip so much as a pinky toe into this, right, it's a wrap. Like you're gonna get like your $100,000, $250,000 Bitcoin on top of all this other stuff we were just talking about. So like at a certain point, you just get like escape velocity. You know, you heard that a lot during
yeah.
crypto, whatever.
You know, honestly,
That's
we probably
real.
passed that a while ago, man. You know what I mean? Like when you think about it in
Yeah.
terms of the Bitcoin itself, probably.
But they're
But you know
still
what I'm thinking
deniers
though,
right
like
there.
you know what the main reason is that I'm thinking that like we're gonna be seeing it like another altcoin season soon is that like if Bitcoin does end up going to a retracement, then like that'll historically be when the altcoins do their actual pumps. And secondly, like how can it be that the Litecoin network has grown in the time
Massively. Yeah.
and the price has not?
So
It's
this
it's
is
in a divergence. You know what I mean? In my mind, like eventually, like because it's like the network is going up and the price is going down. So it's like eventually
so
something
you're
breaks
gonna
there.
I'm gonna
Go
jump in
ahead,
here
go ahead.
real quick. So
Yeah,
you're
please.
not thinking about diminishing returns, right? So like if you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, like in 2014, 2013, you had like 1,000x, right? Like screw your 23, 26x you got from the bottom of this cycle to the top of the cycle.
Hmm.
Like 1,000x. And before
Yeah.
that, the next cycle was like a 750x or something like that. But you have these massive gains, and then you drop more and more and more as the market matures in theory, right? Um, until like once again that escape velocity number really hits, like when the world actually tries to play with Bitcoin and then like the thing explodes in value and there is no coming back. That's the Cambrian explosion we're all waiting for, right? Like the utility explosion, like people start using it as a store of value. People start using it to like protect their wealth if they live in countries that are going to be negatively affected over the next few years, right? um that's the Cambrian explosion we're waiting for. But like until that happens, Bitcoin's on this diminishing returns deal. Like if you pay attention to Benjamin Cowan, like he
Yeah.
has all the videos to explain it, and I kind of believe him, right? Because he was on the it's he's right about some things, he's wrong about others. He'll openly admit that. Um, So back to the point, we're on diminishing returns. So like if you look at the amount of gains from top to bottom each cycle, it's diminished each time. This cycle was weird because it was amazingly small. And I think that has to do with the Fed and all the other macro conditions, right? So like I think that you're not going to get an alt rally if you're waiting. Oh, wait, it hit all time highs last time, but it didn't really do much besides all time high. It's old all time high this time. And if you look
Or
at
not even. It
the
didn't
old,
even, it would reach like almost 70% of its all-time high,
yeah,
like
if you
that's
look at
weird to me. But like I can also understand it from a perspective of like more sell pressure, because way back in the day, like no one really owned Litecoin. Now a lot of people do. So like now when it went up a little 10x, it had a lot more sell pressure on it. Whereas originally there were a lot fewer exchanges, a lot fewer people to actually be doing that sell pressure in the first place, and they didn't care about it. So by the time it got up there, there was no one to be selling it. So like I could see that like that could be the case. And a lot of the people that think they missed out last time bought a lot of the same coins. But that to me means that like as long as you keep holding them, those coins have still been bought and like locked up and like set aside and like are like the network is still growing, and like it still seems like it's going to create another one of those supply shocks.
I mean, yes and no, because like what I've noticed with Litecoin is because I've owned Litecoin before. Whoever owns Litecoin, guess what? They also own Bitcoin, and they
Yeah.
favor Bitcoin over Litecoin. So what tends to happen is Bitcoin, oh my bad, Litecoin will have its supply shock because it has a halvening too, right?
Yeah.
And then what tends to happen is those people will they'll watch the price run up and then they sell into Bitcoin. Like they'll sell their Litecoin and go buy Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin pumps. And it's like, oh, I missed the pump. And I think the same thing is just happening in perpetuity. Like if you have two stronger monies, there's actually a economic law. I can't remember the name of it. Like the strongest money always wins, basically. So Litecoin is an inferior version of Bitcoin, effectively, when it comes to market cap, when it comes to network effects, just name brand.
Right.
If you're going to hold one and you have to choose, in the end, you generally choose the harder money. And that's going to be Bitcoin in this case. Like,
right.
Do I think there's enough money floating around that will enter Bitcoin to make you rich if you own Litecoin? Yeah, I think so, but you have to hold a lot longer to get the same amount of results. So that's my argument against Litecoin. And then some of the older coins, like the legacy coins, is what I call Litecoin, Syscoin, whatever you want to think of. Like just because something is a legacy coin doesn't guarantee that it's going to pump. So like think of Feathercoin, Namecoin, WorldCoin, like all these other legacy coins have been around for years. Like their network effects have stopped because they've been so far out of the top 100 or out of the top 50 or top 10 that no one's paying attention to them.
Yeah.
Network effects stop. There's no new demand coming in, but you have an inflationary, semi-inflationary like coin because of like distribution. It kills itself. It starts like this Luna death spiral, like low key, that eventually just causes it to go to zero. So like there's always going to be emissions on Litecoin up until a certain point, right? There's always going to be emissions on most of these coins because that's how they're designed. Like, and that's fun. It is what it is. But like you have to look at its current performance versus its past performance, and you start noticing like, hey, it's doing okay against Bitcoin, or it's getting it destroyed by Ethereum. Like at some point you have to let go and be like, okay, I think maybe I'll just go with where the whales are going, where the money is going. And the money is going into Bitcoin. It's going into Ethereum, right? Those two have consistently through multiple cycles done amazing things. I think Litecoin has done amazing things too, but like if you're holding a portfolio of multiple coins, Litecoin probably has a home, right? But if you have to hold one or two, it's going to be Bitcoin and ETH.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I was mentioning that in one of our first meetings or podcasts or whatever. I was like, the longer I stay in this space, the more I realize that about Bitcoin itself is like it's the stronger money, it's the more scarce asset.
Correct. I mean, Ethereum's trying to change itself into ultrasound money. I hate that. I hate the title of that, but they realize like, oh wait, like we need some kind of monetary principles to make sure our currency is sustainable, right? Because there was no cap on ETH, like it was just going to be emitted forever, and it was
Yeah,
going
I
to
remember
be
that.
a really high amount of Ethereum emitted for a very long time. So part of the merge and part of Ethereum scaling is they're stopping that, right? There's not going to be a cap, but they're making it where it can be deflationary if there's enough use. And if it gets to the point where it's the use drops off, then it becomes inflationary. So it kind of contracts demand depending on supply and demand, which you absolutely need. That's actually a weak spot in Bitcoin, right? Like it doesn't contract. The monetary policy is set. There is no getting around it. That's the reason I think those two probably have a really good chance. But I never finished where we were in the market. I talked too much. Sorry about that. So
No, no, please.
yeah, I think I explained why I think we're in a down cycle, and I think it's going to be a down cycle for a few years. Hopefully, I'm wrong, so we can go make a bunch of money. I like money.
Right. Well, are you planning on doing DeFi stuff in that time? Because like if you're sitting there for 3 years, you may as well be generating yield off that, right?
Yeah. So like where I'm at in DeFi is like there's a few projects that I'm in. CVX. I'm looking hard at Curve because I think CVX is about to nuke. I mean, like badly. It already has nuked, but like it could get worse. Um, so CVX, Curve, Frax, and then like GMX and Umami or whatever are ones that I'm looking
I
at. Like,
saw I saw Umami mentioned online the other day. People are actually pretty into it.
yeah.
They're
So
yeah.
it's once again DeFi Lego. It takes something where people are already in DeFi. Because if you're hardcore DeFi, you're not leaving. If you're still listening to this conversation and you're curious about DeFi, you're hardcore DeFi. Like everyone else has ran for the hills at this point. So it's just survivors, like the people who are actually going to build and keep making something of this space. We're all here. We're all figuring out what we can do, and we're all building
Yeah.
so that when the next bull cycle comes along, you get that life changing wealth. Um, and that's why I'm here, honestly, because I really believe crypto will create life changing wealth. So, like, I really wanted to say this real quick. It
Yeah,
takes
yeah.
a cycle or two. Like, you need working capital to really make life changing wealth. So, you get your working capital from investing in the first cycle and just surviving or dealing with the bear however you can without losing it all, right? And then after that, you have working capital for the second cycle. You've been around, you've been building, or you've been seeing which coins are most likely to survive and do really well, and you invest in them during the bear so that when they do hit their 100x, 200x, whatever, you can take full advantage of that, right? And then you go from having working capital to having, excuse my language, a shit ton of capital, and then you're free, right? You're free to sell that and use it however you want. You can buy property, real world assets. You can park it in stable coins and just get yield indefinitely. Because, like, during the bull markets, you can get 10, 15, 20% yield. Like, that's totally a thing. Why would you
Mhm.
not do that? If you can get 10% yield off, $5 million, like that's more than most Americans are going to need. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're pretty much good. But like 2 to 3 cycles is all you need. Right. And don't get me wrong, the cycles take time. You're looking at 4 to 6 years for each cycle, honestly, I think, because I think they're getting longer. And that is the key. So you just have to survive, you have to build, and you have to find good projects. And like once everything is bottomed, then I'm going in hard. But like I'm not catching the falling knife this time around. I'm just not. I'll sit in stables, I'll wait patiently. There's going to be a suckers rally or two, but I'm hands off. I'm just gonna let it happen. Now I still have a moon bag. I still have a little bit of BTC. I still have a little bit of ETH. I still have these other projects, but I'm going to be probably like 70% stables by the time this all plays out. Like in the next 2 months, I'll probably be deeply in the stables. And let's say I'm wrong and it does rally up to like 60K or something like that, and we are threatening new all-time highs. I'll be the sucker that buys in right then. Cause like at that point, we have definitely started a new cycle. And at that point, there's still way further to go, especially if it's like the Fed pivots, they have to get employment back to where it needs to be. We're looking at all these cycles move into like a prosperity phase where like everything's growing again, everything's risk on, that's when you throw your money in. That's when you let it grow for you. So those
Right.
are my thoughts on how things are going to go. Um, and I think I nailed most of my points that I was writing down when you were
Still,
talking.
60K Bitcoin seems really expensive, even for even for the bottom of a new cycle. You know what I mean?
So I would say that like there was a point when we looked at 15K Bitcoin and we were like, oh my God, that's so expensive. And then the cycle
Right.
before
But
that, it
here's the
was
thing.
like
I totally
thousand
agree.
dollar Bitcoin was
I
unthinkable.
know. And it's going to go to a million. It's going to go to infinity. But I mean, like comparatively at the same time, if Bitcoin is at like near 55 to 60 grand and Litecoin is sitting at $100, I'd probably rather buy Litecoin.
That's a good argument. Yeah. Especially if you're just looking to cash out, like you're trying to get those
Right.
multiples. Yeah.
Right. Because like then you're waiting for that 3 week period wherein everything pumps and then you get out. Right.
Yeah. It's tough though, right? So like,
I'd have to look at the charts and see what they all look like when we actually get there and stuff. Because it's like a lot of these things are like fine to have a dollar value, but then it's also like valued against each other. And sometimes I can just be like, okay, like this is a cheap Litecoin, and you can see that in the actual like Bitcoin price, like priced against Bitcoin as well.
yep. So like if the idea is to buy it and then sell it back into Bitcoin, then you have
Yeah.
to look at that BTC comparative, right? If the idea is to buy it and cash out in the dollars and use acquire real world assets, then you just take the dollar value and be happy.
Yeah.
If you're going to sit there for super long periods of time, like me and you are both long term oriented, just you could buy Bitcoin and call it a day, right? Or if you're in that earlier stage where you're trying to build your capital, that's when you start looking at the alts a little bit more. But this is the seduction of crypto, right? Like you come for the Bitcoin and then you're like,
Yeah.
I can get all these gains over here, but you have to be exceedingly careful when you go over there because you can lose everything over here real fast, right? Like I have watched hacks go down. Optimism just had their own, like, have you heard about that yet?
They got hacked or something? No, I haven't even heard that.
Yeah. So like somebody sold like 20 million OP tokens. Like they got access to like a multi-sig contract or something like that. The price literally halved like overnight, right? So like that is what I mean. Like you have all these great projects, great potential, but it's straight up venture capital. You don't know what's going to happen with these things. They can go to zero or they can make you a billionaire, right?
Yeah.
But you can just be chill and hang out with Bitcoin, maybe some Ethereum, maybe some Litecoin, and call it a day, right? So
And
in
even
my
just the
mind,
Bitcoin
like you
itself is
just
probably
got
going
to
to
balance the
outperform.
two,
Yeah.
huh?
I was going to say, like, even the Bitcoin itself is just probably going to outperform everything you try to do because you're going to try to, like, every time you move money around, you're probably being inefficient about it. And then the market's going to eat your portfolio. And you can try. And sometimes I try, but like,
Especially in DeFi, like everything you do is parasitic. There's always a fee.
in
There's
DeFi,
always a
everything
cost.
always a
Yeah.
fee, unless you're moving large amounts of money. But and really, here's the main problem with altcoins too. They go down forever until they don't. So it's like
Yeah.
you buy it and then you're in a downtrend for like forever until suddenly for 3 weeks you regain all of that and more. And then hopefully the news isn't so crazy at the time that like it convinces you to not sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
The
obviously,
euphoria gets to you and you hold for too long
yeah,
and then get dumped on. Yeah.
yeah,
So that was the other thing I was going to say. There are things that you have to set aside. So you have to have base parameters, right? So like one thing I'm looking at is like I think it's the 20-week moving average and the 21 EMA, the bull market support band. And I through Benjamin Cowan and a few others, like whenever Bitcoin is trading above that, you can play with alts. You're generally going to be okay. But like when Bitcoin falls beneath that, you're almost better just going to stables at that point. Because like at a
yeah.
minimum, you're looking at 3 to 6 months of just pain, right? Like
Well,
the
what
price
about
is
just
gonna
straight up
go down.
active trading? Like during
Hmm?
what about just active trading? Because it's like if we're waiting for these 2000% pumps, maybe that's silly. And during a bear market, maybe we should just take the 3 to 5% every couple of days. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no, because you just don't. That's where the volatility gets you. You get chopped up. So like, unless you have
Yeah.
an edge, unless you are well versed on trading, I would tell the average I have told the average retail investor, don't trade. Like I have made all the mistakes, all of them, right?
Yeah.
And my worst ones was when I was trying to trade the market. Because like I think me and you said it earlier on, like
The bots will win.
90% of traders lose 90% of their money in like the first 90 days or something crazy like that. So like that's
Yeah.
retail. We come in, we try, we fail, and we step away. So like unless you have an edge, I tell people just don't trade. Now, if you have an algorithm that's straight fire and you have bots that are working for you that are doing a great job, have that at Hoss. But your average retail person, they don't know what a bot is. They don't use that stuff, right? They're just trading off their gut and their technicals and they see how it goes. So, oh, so that's basically where I'm at now is like try to find somewhere, wait for the bottom or wait for momentum coming off the bottom, buy that, let it get past the bull market support band. If you want to get into alts at that point, have at it, Hoss. You'll have missed a lot of the explosive potential. Who
Yeah.
cares? But like you're still gaining, like you're gaining faster than your Bitcoin comparative, you're winning basically at that point, right? Um, and then like you have to figure out a good metric on when to take profits at the top. So like Benjamin Cowan has his risk metric and it works really well for Bitcoin, not so much for the altcoins, right? Um, you have to figure out when to take profits and systematically do it. That way, if you don't call the top, if you're too late or you're too early, you don't get wrecked. Like you don't lose something, you don't lose the gains you've waited for 3 or 4 years to take. Because like I did that this time around, and I knew that was going to be a possibility. Um, and it makes this bear market much more harder for me to deal with because it's like I went from, let's say hypothetically 60K to almost 400K. And now I'm under 100K again in value. And it's like, oh my God, like if I just sold the top, why didn't I sell the top? Well, I'm a retail investor. I don't have the tools to know when that's going on. I'm just now educating myself on how to proceed and how to plan for the next bear market, next bull market. So that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that amount of money in certain coins will even move the market,
hmm?
That amount of money in certain coins will move the market.
Yeah, 100%. So that's if I'm trading and I'm playing with the small cap coins though, right?
Yeah.
So my thought is basically just be patient, wait, let whales play whale games. I can hop on the back and swim with the whales as they pump, this Solanas or the ADAs or whatever it is that time
Yeah.
around. Because
What
like
I've been thinking is like maybe okay, like maybe okay. So if I'm thinking like Litecoin is a really decent bet, a really safe bet, then maybe it's not going to be like 1,000% gain, or maybe it will, but like maybe I don't have to like sit there and wait for it. Because maybe what I can do is just put a not large enough trade into it so that if it does 100 or 200% increase, I feel good enough to actually cash out of it, and I don't really worry about like the 100,000% or 10,000%,
yeah.
because
So
because like what happens to me is like I put like a small amount into these trades, or a comparatively small for some people, I guess. I
it's
don't know.
bet sizing, right? You're not going all in on just
Yeah.
one point. Yeah.
But then
So
what happens is like
right.
I look at it like a dollar value, and then I'm like, like it could go up more. Like it's only like a couple of thousand or like whatever. It's, like it's not going to be worth much. So I leave it in there, and then it like and then it ends up falling down. And then I'm like, well, if I put more money into it, maybe I would have been more willing to de-risk.
Yeah, I hear what you're
And
saying.
like maybe I should think about that in general, because it's like if you're going to be confident enough to put money in the first place, it's like
To me, like that falls under I don't mean to be offensive if I am, please
No,
forgive me.
please, no. But we're just talking.
It falls under bet sizing and risk, right? So like it's human nature to be more risky with smaller amounts of money, right? Like you want to preserve your capital. But if you're throwing like, let's say you have a portfolio of 100,000 and you put $1,000 into something, though, that's like 1%. Who gives a shit, right? Like
Yeah.
it's much harder to be disciplined and take your profits in that scenario, right? Now, if you have a portfolio of 10,000, you put 5K in a Litecoin, oh, you're gonna be watching it like a hawk, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna be
And then you'd
doing
be
your
like,
best
hey, it
to
doubled. I
mitigate that
de-risked.
risk.
Yeah.
So like I think that's kind of what gets most people. It got me because I was doing the same thing with Chainlink back in the day, right? And you have to have a structured plan for when the bull comes. Like if you're just like, oh, cool, it went up 200%, but last time it went up 450%, I'm gonna let this thing ride. And that's human nature. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Like we always want more. So like if you have a structured plan where it's like, okay, if it 4X's during this bull market, I'm gonna take half and then I'll set a new target at that date. You could do that or something like that. But that all falls under pre-planning and having the plan. I did not have a good plan this time around. So I ended up getting wrecked this way all the way down, basically, right? And now I
I had a
know.
plan, but like only two of my coins actually hit my price target. So
Yeah,
that's the problem with my plans. It's like stuff doesn't always go according to plan. Then you gotta be like,
yeah.
okay, whatever.
And then I
At
didn't
least
have
some
a
of
good
them did
exit
though.
plan, right? Like if I knew about the bull market support band and like its history with Bitcoin, like the second Bitcoin broke under that, I'd have sold. Like, I would have sold 90% of what I had, 80% of what I had, and then leave the 20% as a moon bag, right? Um, and maybe I only get 50% of my profit, but like I'll take an extra 200K, like
Yeah,
I'll take an extra
yeah.
$1 million, it's whatever you were working with. So like these are all things that you have to be in the market. You have to have exposure to. You have to listen and learn from people that are smarter than you. By the way, there's a reason I called you the future when I met you, bro. Like you're the future. You're gonna have multiple cycles of experience and learning to deal with this stuff. And you're smart. You're not all in on crypto. You pay attention to equities and bonds and everything like that. So like yeah, you're gonna be fine. Like you are not part of the masses that's gonna be working at semi-minimum wage job for the rest of your life. Like no.
Well,
So
it'll
yeah,
be interesting to see how the cycles continue, if it is going to continue to be 4 years, or if like some macroeconomic stuff will actually affect it to be more like a 12-year cycle, or like 8 years, or like something like that, you know? So it'll
I
just be interesting to watch.
yeah, I truly believe that like we're gonna have longer cycles, right? Like they're going to lengthen. And I
But the
think it's
halvings are exactly at 4 years. You know what I mean? That's why I'm just being like, maybe that's just going to be cyclical supply shocks
yeah. So the reason I
indefinitely at
say that
regular
is
intervals.
twofold, right? I think one, the supply shock is less and less effective the further in time you go because the supply shock only halves the supply. So you went from 50 Bitcoins to 25 Bitcoins the
Yeah.
first halving,
Yep.
right? And now we're going to be going from like 6.25 down to half of that. So what
Right.
happens when it's like the supply shock is, 1 Bitcoin to half a Bitcoin? Like, I mean, the market
Yeah.
dynamics at that point, it's not going to be the same. It's just not.
That's a good point for sure. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Um,
It's,
yeah. In
And
fact,
then
yeah.
the other point that gets me about the lengthening cycle. So, like, as this thing gets more commercialized, right, and monetized and financialized, all the ISIS, right, you're going to have miners like Riot or whoever. They're going to go raise capital from people willing to finance their debt. So they don't have to sell ever. Like, it's the Michael Saylor point, right? Like, you get people that are well capitalized enough to sell when they want to, and their plan is to hold as long as humanly possible, and it just soaks up more of that supply
Yeah.
forever and
You
ever and
know,
ever.
honestly, though, you got to be careful with that because people say that as more of a narrative at the top, and then it turns out they've been selling because they don't want
Yeah,
to be sitting on that much volatility either. Because the
I
world is
agree.
actually running on so much debt, they have stuff to pay, you know?
Yep, I agree. But like, I still got to think they're holding as much as they can. Like, they're
Yeah,
not.
in general, yeah, that's just gonna be it's
Mhm.
gonna be the asset number one that they're gonna be scooping up, and then like maybe if they do sell some, they're still holding some, and like a
Yep.
lot of times when they sell it, they like either borrow against it or they do stuff like that too.
Yeah,
So
because then they don't have to pay taxes on that, right? So,
and they can loan it
um,
out too. So
yep. That's when you get
yeah,
companies like Celsius doing their thing. So, yeah, I think over time, like this market cycles get lengthened, then they won't be as volatile because then you have places like to counteract that Coinbase, all the exchanges, they're selling some of that crypto. I guarantee you, right? So like
well, yeah,
they're,
yeah, to you when you
mhm.
buy it,
But also they might be taking some of those profits, cashing them into dollars because like Coinbase is buying and holding Bitcoin. They're buying
they
and
do,
holding,
they do
yeah.
have a lot of crypto on their balance sheet.
So I
Yeah,
gotta think like some of these exchanges are selling some of the crypto to operating expenses or whatever, and they're gonna be net sellers like in perpetuity. But I don't think it's gonna be anything like the miners and they're dumping during previous cycles. Like if you start to stop the hemorrhage from the miners, I think that adds to that Cambrian explosion we were talking about earlier on. It hastens it, it brings it on sooner. So like, sorry I talked over you so much, man.
No,
Like,
no, man, I'm glad to hear you talking, and I'm tired this morning anyways. I'm glad. So I appreciate your time, and I'll get this edited and I'll see you next week.
cool. Thank you, man. See you next
Peace
week.
out, man. Have a good one.